We are very happy to be joined by Minister Liu of Council for Economic Planning and Development. And actually, by design, I'm supposed to be the moderator of the panel discussion, but I think I would like to actually to moderate this panel discussion in a different way. I would like this to be more like a dialogue between among three of us. And so instead of me asking questions, maybe Christina can also ask questions. And then Dr. Phelps, if you like to, can also ask us about what you want to know about Taiwan and China. Okay? So Christina, would you like to ask a question, or I should start? Okay, why don't you start? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Phelps and Professor Chow. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a very good occasion that today we can hear this presentation. And I do have some follow-up questions, though. Okay, the first one is that you mentioned in your speech regarding that it seems from the share prices, the relation between the share prices and the quarterly earnings, it seems that the long-term, you say the long-term thinking has disappeared. And I think that that's a very interesting point, because as we see, for instance, I think that there's a puzzle actually for Taiwan. For example, Taiwan's share prices for the past 3 years is not really moving much to anywhere. But in contrast, our GDP growth last year was really high. It's 10.88% for the real growth. And also our investment been picking up, which is 32.5% relative to Singapore's 8% and Hong Kong and South Korea's 6%. So from many standards, that it's really a great performance for last year. But somehow we don't know what our investors in the market are thinking of. And not only the local investors, but also for the foreign investors, we don't know where they went and what they are thinking of. But we think that if, based on the fact that investment is, especially I think it's a key variable, that investment has been picking up so much. In contrast with, like, for the past 10 years, we have negative investment on average every year. Then last year definitely was a very different picture, had a very different picture. So I'm wondering if you know that what our investors are thinking of, is it because also they are not thinking of something long-term, or, I mean, so can you get like some idea of what they are thinking of? Especially, I noticed your theory that you say activities are driven by expectations and beliefs. By expectations, when people have no information, and by beliefs, when people have no knowledge. And so that, just I'm very impressed by that thinking, and I'm just wondering that, can you give us some explanation or guess about what our investors are thinking of? Thank you.
That's a fabulous question. Quite a challenge, especially since I don't know very much about the Taiwan economy. I guess we can't accept an answer that we can't accept the answer that, well, investors have become more nervous, because there was such a boom in share prices in many markets. So I don't know that, I don't think that there's been any generalized increase in investor nervousness over the past 12 months. But on the other hand, am I correct that the stock market in Shanghai, the shares market in Shanghai and Hong Kong have been a bit nervous in the past 6 months or so? So maybe it's partly that. It's just because, of course, there's perceived to be such a dependency, for a lack of a better word, between of Taiwan on China, that such a tight connection at the present time, that nervousness about China's short-term or near-term or mid-term future could translate into subdued share prices in Taiwan. Sorry, that's about all I can do. Of course, I just.
In the U.S. too.
Well, yes, in the U.S. now we've had quite a reversal in just the past in the past month or so. But I guess I don't want to claim too much, but I guess it's fair to say that this recent correction of the stock market in New York, or the recent correction in share prices of U.S. companies, does reflect a kind of sobering reevaluation of the profitability of investing and the profitability of capital in the U.S. economy. And for a long time, for the past year or two, there's just been such a drumbeat of enthusiasm about investing in shares in the United States, and there's been such an insistence that a strong recovery is on its way, and profits are very high. Well, that's true. Profits are very high, but but the growth is so poor that the profits can't be reasonably expected to be growing very rapidly. So, and but as Keynes said, John Maynard Keynes said, first he said two things which are important. He said a lot of things that are important, but in this context, he said two things that were particularly important. One was, which was said, we don't really know the future, so we're basically forming educated guesses, hunches, intuitions, and so forth about what shares would be worth, will prove to be worth. And likewise, entrepreneurs are, when they make an investment decision or give the green light to some new innovative project, it's to some extent an article of faith. It's not the application of rational expectations, because rational expectations don't apply to situations of novelty and Knightian radical uncertainty. The other thing Keynes said is that, well, to finish the first thought, so people form beliefs, but you can't call it knowledge of the future, They've reformed beliefs about the future. And then the second thing that Keynes said is these beliefs, they seem to be kind of steady for a while. Nothing much happens to them. And then the accumulation of just a few small pieces of evidence can cause such a belief to collapse. Keynes says somewhere that beliefs are flimsy. And so everybody's in New York has been looking forward to this bright future of a full recovery and profits as high as the sky. And now, after 1 month or 6 weeks of bad news, suddenly the future is very dark. So
I hope that's not for us.
I hope so.
So Dean Phelps, so do you think United States is going to have a very, very slow recovery for the next few years?
Very slow?
Yeah.
Recovery for the
Yeah. So what can the government do? I mean,
Well, I've been, first of all, I want to say that I was not as pessimistic as some of my friends in the economics profession during the downturn. Some people were saying the unemployment rate's going to go to 12% or 14%, or it's going to be so bad they don't even want to give a number to it. And a couple of times on television, so I can prove it, I said I think the unemployment rate will go above 8%, but I don't think, I'll be very surprised if it goes over 10. Well, it did go 1 month, it went to 10.1, but then it immediately went back. Now, about the recovery, I've been saying that the recovery will be partial, that we won't go back to the extraordinary periods such as the internet revolution, when the unemployment rate in the US was 3.9%, and we won't go back even to the best number in the Bush administration, which was 4.6%. And I don't think we'll even go back to the normal level of unemployment of the mid-1990s, when the unemployment rate was 5.6% for 2 years running. And so I've been saying I think that, somewhere between 7 and 8, between 7% and 8% is where the recovery will bring us. And now I've been a little bit, so now as this bad news began to come in, I held my position. I said, you can't read, you shouldn't read so much significance into 1 week's data or 2 weeks' data. I stand by my forecast, 7 to 8.
for how many years?
But
I mean, for
long time.
For a long time. so does it mean that the natural rate of
But
unemployment
now I'm
is-
beginning to think that maybe that was a little too optimistic. I don't know.
7 to 8% is too optimistic. So that means
Could
a
be.
lot of people will be out of job for a long period of time. And you spend a lot of time studying, doing research in economic inclusion. What do you think the government can do to include these people who are out of job, back into the economy? 7 to 8% would mean that there would be like more than maybe 14 or 15 million American people out of job, right?
Yeah, well, it's going to have bad effects on inclusion. It will mean that some disadvantaged segments of society will have very few breadwinners, very few people supporting themselves in jobs at self-supporting wage rates. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say that we already have a rather large prison population. Huge numbers of people have been sent up for prison terms, typically on drug violations. So we're looking at a pretty bad situation over the next, I mean, and so that it is alarming. Maybe what will happen is that if the unemployment rate comes down, but then seems to settle down at something like 7.5%, and then stay there for a year or two, then maybe the U.S. Congress will say, well, we have to do something about this that's directed, that's targeted at this high unemployment. And this doesn't mean more free pills for people in Florida. That it would mean subsidies to companies for employing people. Companies, private enterprise companies. I think maybe that would be, that's a possibility. I'm afraid, though, that what will happen is they'll say, oh, well, let's open a big problem to cure cancer. Well, that won't be job creating, but you can't explain that to the U.S. Congress. They just don't understand. They think a dollar is a dollar. It doesn't matter how the things are structured. $1 creates as much jobs as another dollar. I'm afraid we have to thank Keynes for that. Yeah, he taught that. Dollars.
So is it possible that the Asia or the rest of the global economy can grow healthily without sufficient growth in Europe or in the United States in the future?
Well, I was saying hurriedly at the end there that in the medium-term future, I think the answer is yes, that China could become a lot more indigenously innovative, that could support a stronger and broader business investment activity, and so that rapid growth could continue with high employment, lots of jobs created in the capital goods sector, and the march toward a higher and higher position in the league tables in terms of output per worker and everything could continue. I think that's so. I mean, Asia will always be at a somewhat lower level of performance than it would be if Europe and the West were thriving, if Europe and America were thriving, but it doesn't look like that's in the cards.
I have another challenging question. Actually, I think this is unfair because I should provide you with more of the Taiwan's background. So, but I would like to just ask this question, and maybe in the future you can really give more advice to Taiwan's policy. Yeah. Okay, so there's a really puzzling puzzling issue in Taiwan, which is that our economic growth rate, of course, for the past decade was not as good as before. For instance, in the decade of, say, 1981 to 90, our growth rate was like 7.6%, the real growth rate. And from 1991 to 2000, the growth rate was 6.2%, which was excellent for both. But still, the last decade, even though was not as great as before, but was still okay from international standard because it's 4.5 on average. And especially last year was 10.88. Okay, anyway, so the growth rate itself, they do not differ much from each other. However, our salary, or say wages, did not increase, stopped increasing for the past 10 years. This is really a puzzling piece in Taiwan because gave you the statistics for this wage or say salary increase. annually on average for the decade of 1981 to 90 was 12% every year. Then for the decade of 91 to 2000 was 5%, which is quite reasonable still. But for the last decade was only increased by less than 1% every year. So this is, okay, one piece of the information. The second counterpart, which is that recently we have did more study and found out that maybe the key is because the growth in investment. Because for the last decade, our economic growth mainly was driven by export-led growth and not the investment or consumption. And in country with before, that was very, very different. And also, not only that it's export-driven, but mostly it's like related with China and Hong Kong. So we are now, the government policy is focusing on boost investment, especially because we signed the ACFA with China taking effective this year. And so we think that by putting the double engine, say, especially the investment-led and the consumption-led, or say domestic-led growth, as well as the export-led growth, that should help for the wage increase, as well as also the unemployment. Because we know that your such famous theory about the structural unemployment rate. And for Taiwan, for the golden decades, that we have unemployment for like below 2%. And only the last 10 years, we had unemployment rate suddenly increased to 4.5%. And then after that, it's so hard to reduce that unemployment rate for the natural unemployment rate. So again, for helping or say relieving that issue, that problem, we are also using the method of investing more in Taiwan. So I would like to ask your opinion and comment. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like Taiwan is a little America. Weak investment, some real wage stagnation, but it's more dramatic. It jumps out at you here, while in the United States data, it hasn't been, it seems all much more moderate. It's an exaggeration of the radicals to say that there's been no growth of wages in the United States for 20 years or something ridiculous like that. Because what they do is they don't count in the wage that the employer pays the skyrocketing Medicare insurance premiums that the employer has to cover by law for employees. By law is not exactly accurate, but let's move on. It's more complicated now. Okay, so well, of course, this has something to do with this phenomenon of weak investment activity and weak real wages. Well, first of all, they're very linked because business investment activity, I know this is counterintuitive, you won't believe it, but I actually had an undergraduate student confirm it for me. I hired him to look up the data. Incredibly tedious job, but business investment activity is relatively labor intensive. Production of consumer goods, on the whole, is relatively capital intensive. I wrote recently somewhere that farm goods are produced with wire fences. My copy editor didn't have a clue as to what I meant, but what I meant is that there's a huge amount of capital that a farmer has to invest to put fences around the ranch, so a rancher, let's say, or fences around the ranch so that the cattle won't disappear off somewhere. And even farms have fences, and then there's all those tractors and all that, and then there's a farmer or two. So I mean, they have this tremendous capital, these tremendous capital investments producing the food we eat. And then take another thing, housing. Housing is another big ticket item in the consumer basket of American households. And it won't come as any surprise to you to learn that housing is produced with capital. The services of houses are produced with capital, namely the house. And it is not produced with labor. In California, a few people have Japanese gardeners, but most people just have the house. And the services are unpaid services by the occupants themselves in their leisure time. So, so when there's a fall in the proportion of output and national product, when there's a fall in the proportion of gross national product that is production of capital goods, essentially purchases of capital goods by U.S. businesses, in the case of the United States, when there's a drop in domestic investment expenditures, there go the jobs. And you can't recreate those jobs by boosting consumption by an equal and opposite amount. It doesn't work because there are not so many jobs producing consumer goods. So I think that, so of course it doesn't answer the question very deeply to say that wages are stagnant because business investment is stagnant, or to say that business investment is, so okay, but anyway, so I think the answer is, I think the answer is partly that competition from China has operated to reduce the relative price of a range of capital goods in the global economy, and that has caused, and that effect has been transmitted to real wages.
Well, Dr. Phelps, in your speech, you seem to not be too optimistic about the ability to innovate in the United States. But many countries look up to the United States for innovation. And so do you think the United States is as innovative as in the past, or something has happened that make it less innovative?
Sorry, the last part.
Do you think that the United States can be as innovative as in the past?
Can it reclaim, regain
Yeah.
its past dynamism? Can the United States regain its past dynamism? Well, I suppose there must be some set of government policy actions, the sum of which would do the trick. But the thing is, I can only think, I've been thinking about this question for 2 or 3 years now, and I only have 2 or 3 answers to it so far. One is you could cut the corporate profits tax from 30%, which is pretty high in the United States, to something like, say, 15%, so as to make it more enticing for business people to start new enterprises, and with their new idea, their new vision, and everything. Then, if they're successful, they will rake in a lot of money. Another thing you could do is you could create a First National Bank of Innovation. The government, in the United States economy, almost everything is subsidized except work and innovation. Those two things are not subsidized. But those are the two most important things we hope for from the economy. The economy is it's treated by the Congress like some sort of a milk cow. You know, it's just, the last thing you would want to do would be to do anything to invigorate the business sector. So anyhow, I've proposed a couple of times that the United States create a kind of development bank for innovation. And I was starting to say that there's already plenty of precedent for these things. The United States has the farm credit system. It's a network of banks spread all over the country, and the government provides a little subsidy to these banks. And then the banks, that permits the banks to make loans to farmers at reduced interest rates. And the banks help the farmers to make sensible decisions about new fertilizers and new seeds to plant and so forth. And the farm credit system has been self-sustaining. It didn't go broke. It didn't create scandals. It didn't lend money to the farms of congressmen or anything like that. It had a pretty good record. And so my thought was, why doesn't the Congress do that with innovation? But you know, these are just, the economy is so huge and the problem is so endemic throughout the economy that I'm not sure that 10 ideas like that would be enough.
Okay, actually, I would like to thank you for your earlier response. I think that answered my question, and that's our policy for now, and we will continue for that. But you mentioned that you asked one of your students to give you the data, and so I'll tell you Taiwan's statistics as well, because we have looked at the correlation between investment and unemployment rate for the synchronized data as well as for the lag effect. And it's very strong ever since for long term, for short term, that definitely investment is the key to drive the employment. And also that we believe that's the key for driving the wage rates. And that's why that for the investment, say for the 1981 to 90, was increased by 13% every year. That was by far the highest among the four Asian tigers. And then for the 1991 to 2000, we increased every year investment by 8%. That was also very good. But for the year of 2001 to 2010, was negative 2.7% every year. So we think that's really the key for Taiwan to have this turnaround for
what?
0.2. Negative 2.7. Negative 2.7 every year. Yeah, so it's really a dramatic drop from like 8%, 10% to negative 2. And of course, that was a 10-year. I think that everything in Taiwan was had this big turn for unemployment rate, for the salary and everything. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, last year, we've been now picking up because the investment, again, increased by 32%, which was the highest. And so we hope that starting from this year, that we will continue that. So just to let you know.
And you think that was partly in response to the measures that you took?
No, actually, we think that has a lot to do with the cross-trade issue, because people, including the consumer confidence level, was really low for that decade. And a lot of tensions between the cross-trade. People didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that that's the key to drive the whole sentiment. So just to let you update for this information.
That's really interesting. By the way, did you ever study what the effects of government purchases are on wages and employment?
Yes, we did. But
Tell me what you got.
Very low. Very low.
Positive but low.
Yeah, positive but low. Yeah. Our multiplier in general for the government expenditure was less than 2 for the government expenditure multiplier, or for the Keynesian multiplier was like 1 point something. And then for the government expenditure also for the last decade was like negative every year. Yeah. For the government, we didn't spend much on consumption, and the government investment was very low. And again, we tried to pick up after the 2008 tsunami crisis for the government expenditure. And our budget, or say the debt relative to GDP, is about 36% in total, but people are extremely concerned about the government debt issue. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, so
I think I should
yes, please.
ask
Would
you
you like
questions.
to say? Yes, please, please. Yeah, please, please. We'll try our best to help you understand our, your question. Yeah. Would you
I'm
like
sorry?
would you like to ask questions?
No, no.
No, are you sure?
Yeah. I could ask questions all day, but I'm afraid it wouldn't be of general interest. I just have my, my particular research interests.
Okay. Well, you mentioned about cutting corporate tax in order to encourage innovation. But I'm not sure if I'm correct, but as far as I know, this financial crisis, at least in the United States, has hurt small and medium-sized companies much more than large corporations, which is a problem for the U.S. because prior to 2007, when the financial crisis occurred, I think small companies, new startup firms actually created jobs in the United States, while the employment of large corporations did not increase. So if small companies were hurt more than large companies, definitely employment situation would be a problem, right?
Well, could I jump in there to
yes,
say
please,
that
yes.
I think it was bad reporting somewhere in the process that led people to believe that the Kaufman Foundation had shown that small companies create jobs while big companies do not. And the Kaufman Foundation later clarified matters, and they explained that, now how do they put it? Maybe you both know, that it's young firms, new firms, that create jobs, startups. And if a firm has been around for a long time, then its small size doesn't make it a big job creator per dollar.
I see.
The age of the company.
Yeah, it's the age, not the size, right?
But since actually you are here to sign an agreement with National Chance University to foster entrepreneurship, and what do you think we can do in Taiwan or in mainland China, the government can do to foster entrepreneurship, to encourage people to, to create new business, to have more ideas that can be commercialized and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You confused me. You talked about a subsidy scheme.
I'm not so sure what the government can do.
You meant subsidizing innovation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, not necessarily subsidizing innovation, but any means the government can adopt to encourage innovation, especially people who want to start their own business.
Yeah. What can it do?
Yeah, what can the government do? Yes. Yeah.
To do, well, the government can try to do things with the financial sector that will steer more make it easier for entrepreneurs starting up new businesses to obtain finance. So that's basic. I think that's really very, very, very important. And it could, the government could do all sorts of fiscal things, right? Like it could allow large write-offs of capital expenditures of all kinds, no questions asked, to encourage more startups. But I think the longer-term solution is going to depend upon, I think in the long run, it's going to be very important to make sure that we have the old classical spirit of vitalism still firing away on all 8 cylinders. I worry that the presidents of the United States, as they come along one by one, they never say anything much anymore about adventure, experiment, exploration, discovery. I think you almost have to go back to Abraham Lincoln to hear any positive comment about work. It's just, it's incredible. I mean, all the whole value system that we used to think was the cornerstone of the American economy is considered to be almost scandalous and absurd. And now you have highly reputed economists connected, at least temporarily, with Sarkozy. Highly reputed economists, you probably know who they are. They're friends of mine. I won't mention their names, but the highly reputed economists saying that we ought to construct a national index of welfare, and a big component in that index ought to be leisure. I mean, my goodness. I don't think there's a single philosopher I know in the Western world, and I've read a few. I don't think there's a single philosopher that's ever extolled leisure. From Aristotle and Virgil and Montaigne and Hume and certainly Nietzsche and William James and Henri Bergson, they're all interested in a lust for life, in flourishing and involvement, but you would not know that from the way the official organs in the country talk and write. So I think that's something that's really important to work on.
All right, Dr. Phelps, I can assure you that we in Taiwan work very hard. Okay, we promise Dean Phelps to have at least 5 minutes to conclude his speech and the panel discussion today. We only have about 5 minutes to go, but you can have 6 though if you like to. Yeah.
I don't even think it's necessary now. What I tried to do in my talk was just describe what I think is the changing environment within which Asia is operating. And I think the Western economies are significantly different now than they were as recently as 1975. And there's been a lot of deterioration. And I always get a little bit nervous in saying these things because, first of all, it's so easy to exaggerate and get carried away and to describe something as horrendous when it's only, well, a small problem. But I do feel that that my view is more accurate than the other views that, some of the other views that I hear out there, which suggests that there's nothing to worry about. You know, there's such a propaganda machine in the venture capital industry. I mean, they would have us believe that they single-handedly, they and the technologists in the new Silicon Valley companies, that they have solve the problem of our future, that they are going to create and go on, they have created and will go on creating this wondrous future for us, and things are fine, and thanks to them. And but the thing is that they're a tiny piece of the picture. All that venture capital investment in toto adds up to something like, is less than 2% of total investment expenditures in the US economy. The trouble is we don't have, first of all, the venture capital industry is pretty short-termist, certainly not very generous towards the new startup entrepreneurs. The venture capitalists exact very tough terms, and secondly, just as I said in my talk, so much innovation has nothing to do with science or heavy-duty engineering or high-tech stuff. It's just practical people doing their job who see better ways to do things. And anyhow, so I think things are tougher for Asia has not discovered a rose garden in the West that it can from which it can draw fruit with little effort, just almost mechanically go out there every day and help yourself to a few more fruit. And that's not going to work. You're going to run out of fruit fairly soon. And but you have the wonderful opportunity to have a great life because growing your own fruit. So maybe it's not so important that the West is going to disappoint your expectations. Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you very much for the very exciting discussion today. I would like to thank Dean Phelps and Minister Liu for their precious time and for sharing with us their views. Now we have to allow the press to ask a few questions, I guess. Okay. Shall we leave here or?
我们先谢谢Dr. Phelps 还有刘主委以及周行一教授。那我们目前的论坛就是圆满结束。那在论坛之后，我们会进行媒体的联访。那么我们也谢谢各位贵宾今天的参与，我们的论坛到此圆满结束，非常感谢各位。